Good evening. Today is August the 25th, 2024. My name is Travis Patterson, and for those that have not had a chance to meet, we are going to be letting people in the session as we go. So, if you're new to the session, this is Future Diplomats, FSOT, I'm sorry, Future Diplomats Study Session, Foreign Service Officer Test Study Session. So since January, no, sorry, since February of 2024, earlier this year, I've been conducting these study sessions, leading them, and I've been grateful for the chance to do it. Um, this is the second to the last one. So next week will be my final one. We will either and I already have my lesson plan set out for an oral assessment and a group project. However, if the attendees want to do a practice uh, session instead, they'll let me know. I did put a poll in the WhatsApp group. So we're going to go ahead and get started for the sake of time because we have a lot to cover. So this session is, and I'm going to be sharing my screen with you here in a moment. We're going to be going over the government. So understanding the U.S. government, specifically the role of the government in the U.S. Department of State. As people begin to trickle in, I will let them in, but I'll just go ahead and get started for those who are already in. You can either come off mute and ask questions or jump in or contribute, um, or you can remain muted. Either way, I'm going to share my screen now. We're going to share the entire, in fact, let me just share the window. Or just entire screen. Maybe that makes more sense. Okay, here we go. Dismiss. If you're wondering what are you looking at, this is I like to use Evernote. This is basically where I keep my brain. Um, so anytime I'm creating anything or what have you, this is pretty much where it's going to belong. All right, this right here is it's a very interesting map. If you have not ever seen it, this is the United States Department of State organization chart. So you'll notice that there's no names up here. This was last year, January 2023. Different people come in different roles throughout the presidential term or the session while someone is in office. So no names here. However, it's still all good information here. So you will notice that notice that at the top we have the Secretary of State. Don't worry, I have faces to go with this as well, so you don't just have to look at this black and white screen and say, "Hey, this is all we learned today." We have the Secretary of State, which is the head of the Foreign Service, and all things foreign affairs as it pertains to the United States. The Chief of Staff, this person is looks like is reporting to, Council is reporting to. Now, please in the comments or someone here can just come off mute and correct me, but does this person report to the Chief of Staff? Now, the reason why I ask is because the Department of State, and I can probably just do the research here right now, but the Department of the Secretary of State is a part of the cabinet, the president's cabinet. The Chief of Staff is not a part of part of that direct cabinet. So, in the line of succession, chain of command, if anything was to ever happen to our United States president, Chief of Staff was not next in line. We'll go over the cabinet here shortly. So, but breaking these departments down so it makes more sense. So, going to, and you know what, I think I actually understand more of what this is just because it's going that way. I think the Secretary of State also has a Chief of Staff, and the Secretary of State also has a counselor. Because as I see this part of it on this side, the Secretary of State also has a agency of international development, United States mission of the United Nations, which I can happily say, not of the United Nations. Well, is the United Nations? I mean, look at my own resume. Um, well, either way, I've volunteered. Actually, it is. I've volunteered with the United Nations since 2019. I haven't had a chance to actually connect with a specific mission. There's always things to do. You can go to unv.org or you can just type in United Nations volunteer. You can volunteer online or in person. There's many ways to get involved. It's a really nice way to get some exposure. So, yeah, you have the United Nations head of mission. Then you have the Deputy Secretary of State, which reports in directly to the Secretary of State. You have the Deputy Secretary of State as well on this side. I want to do more research about that because it says D and DMR. I don't know exactly what that means. And disclaimer: if this is your first time joining the session, I am just like you. I am on my way to being a future diplomat, hopefully a future ambassador, which is also a diplomat, um, head of mission, I should say, in an embassy. But I'm learning this as we go. So that's the reason why this is a study session. We're learning together. All right, all right. So we have the um, cyberspace and digital policy ambassador at large reporting into the deputy secretary of state. We have the office of the U.S. Foreign Assistance. This is actually pretty interesting. I do highly recommend you go and do your own research on that. But there's so many departments inside of the Secretary of State, and they are really amazing at what they do. And there's also a lot of support for spouses, children who are, and also alumni of Secretary of State and Foreign Service. But let's see here. Plenty. So, but kind of jump into here, this section right here, this section right here in the middle is kind of where we want to begin. Undersecretary of Political Affairs, you'll notice that these are pretty much the cones, right? Political affairs, economic, and environment. Um, this is I haven't necessarily seen this as a part of the cone, but arms control and international security, public affairs, um, diplomacy specifically, management, which is my cone that I'm studying for, or that I'm preparing for, I should say, and the security, civilian security, human rights, and democracy. And under each, you'll have sub, and you're going to see these here in a moment. You have sub um, roles that roll under to these bureaus here. So these sub bureaus, you have African affairs, East African and Pacific affairs, European and Eurasian affairs, Near Eastern affairs, and we're going to get some descriptions on these soon, so on and so forth. But yeah, economic, the business affairs, energy resources, oceans and international environment. I imagine. Now I'm not gonna get into that right now, but I've noticed a new job that I've been probably geeking out about it, but a new job has come up where you can be a space diplomat. So I'm wondering which one of these will that fall up under. I don't know if it's going to be cybersecurity because that's what the um, United States Space Force focuses on, cybersecurity mainly. So, and digital networks and digital traffic. So we'll see. Arms control, compliance, international security, political affairs, education, cultural affairs. And so you'll see here that I'm just kind of going across here now. Global public affairs, administration, budget planning, controller, global finances, consular affairs, diplomatic security. All these are really, really great. These are essentially departments, if you want to look at it like that. So each of these are like the primary cones or department, but in underneath, You think, well, what kind of jobs are there in the Secretary of State? What can I do in the Foreign Service as an officer or a specialist? So many. Anything you can do in the civilian world pretty much is here. So training. So you got Foreign Service Institute, global talent management. So recruiting and managing their talent, information services, Office of Management and Strategy, medical services, overseas building operations, conflict stabilization operations, democracy, human rights, and labor, international narcotics and law enforcement, Office of International Religious Freedom, um, fast forward, so on and so forth. So again, geeking out a little bit. People say, well, you know, I never heard of the Secretary of State. Have you ever watched Mission Impossible? The entire movie is under the Secretary of State. They're foreign affairs. They're going across seas, doing these impossible missions that are off the books. And the people who are saying your mission, should you choose to accept it, is yeah, they're with the Secretary of State. So the more you know. All right. Lastly, you'll see that this line still kind of goes up under the Secretary of State, Office of Civil Rights, Office of Global Women's Issues, Intelligence Research, Inspector General, Legislative Affairs, Legal Office, and so on and so forth. Let's put some faces to it because we've been looking at this for long enough. So there's essentially, and I'm gonna go into it as we scroll into it. Let me see if I can make this screen a little bigger so you don't have to uh, squint into it. Let's see how can I do that. None of these. Okay, zoom in. Oh, what about actual size? No, definitely zoom in. Zoom in. And if I need to, I'll just click on it. But this is a good way for us to move forward and get started. So there's three departments of government, right? You have legislative, executive, and judicial. Well, what are these different um, branches of the government? So you may only be familiar with mainly the executive branch, which you have the president and vice president and the cabinet. But but if you think about lawyers and that sector of, you have legislative, which is Congress, which is the House of Representative and also the Senate. And then you have the judicial branch, which is the Supreme Court. Well, let's go a little bit more into that. What does that look like? So the executive branch, as we do know, is headed by the president, and the vice president headed by them. We've had so many presidents since then, but at the same time, it seems like we haven't had that many compared to other countries because we kind of just got started as a country, right? So 1789, we got our first president, and we became the United States when. You can put that in the comments, but you should know that if you're an Allen Iverson fan, I'll say it like that, or a basketball fan of Philadelphia because it's in the name. I'll leave it at that. So this is our current president, commander in chief. When I enlisted in the Navy, in the military, it is a part of the responsibility to understand and know chain of command. If you are in control and the person next to you or person above you is no longer functional in capacity of their role, you need to know who you report to, right? And yeah, eventually it's going to be this person. He's which is the commander in chief. And because this is not a military um, study session, I'm not going to break down the chain of command there, but yeah, this person is essentially head of foreign affairs as well, but top of it all, next to the Secretary of State, which we will talk about here shortly. The cabinet, which includes the Secretary of State, is composed of 15 heads. So it's not just the vice president and the president. It's composed of 15 different heads and advisors of how to run the executive branch of the government, including starting with the Vice President of the United States, which is Kamala Harris. Her purpose is to be second highest executive officer of the United States government and the President of the Senate. Where a lot of people said, "Hey, what what does the Vice President do?" Now you know. If you like House of Cards, just as an example, really great show. You get to see different parts of it's scandal. Well, maybe not scandal. Maybe scandal. Maybe scandal. Actually, yeah. Although these are like highly dramatized, very good shows. It gives you a romanticized, action-based version of what the government looks like. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken. His role is to oversee the foreign affairs and international relations and advise the president of foreign policy. It's always good to have wise counsel around you, right? When you are CEO, when you are the top, you don't have to know everything. Just know the people who do. Know specific things of what you need to know. That's what the cabinet is. These people report up so that the president can be aware and make decisions. Decisions are also made without the president, more so with the president, I should say. But each of these people are head of their departments. All right, Secretary of Treasury. I got these pictures so I can show y'all too. Secretary of Treasury, Janet Yellen. She manages the national finances, economic policy, and the U.S. Treasury. I wonder if she over the or that actually might be the U.S. Treasury. I'm thinking about the Federal Reserve. I wonder if or is that a separate entity? We'll see. Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin oversees the Department of Defense, including all branches, including the U.S. Navy, U.S. Air Force, the Space Force, U.S. Army, Marines. Attorney General Merrick Garland, the head of the Department of Justice, and responsible for enforcing federal laws, representing the United States in legal matters, and overseeing law enforcement agencies. You would definitely like to think that a lot of these people have training in what they do. If you look up these different people, they have really amazing resumes. I used to wonder when different people were running for office, like um, Ben. I can't think of his last name at the moment, but he was running for office for president of the United States, and then he endorsed President Donald Trump, former President Donald Trump, and he was appointed in to be a part of his cabinet. I want to say it was Ben Carson, actually Ben Carson. He became head of was it education? I just want to look. Oh, housing and urban development. I'm glad I looked. Secretary of Interior. Oh, I don't know if you guys can see that. I kind of circled it. Oh, it went away good. Manages the nation's public lands, national resources, and Native American affairs. I think that's critical, important, very demure. Deb Holland or Holland. I got two pictures of her. I think she's incredible. Secretary of Agriculture oversees the policies related to farming, forestry, rural development, food and safety. Sounds like something familiar, doesn't it? Not FAA, the FDA. Mute that. Okay. Um, Tom Vislak. And one of the biggest reasons why I did want to pull up visuals to go with the training today is because I think it's so easy to just hear titles and hear about what these people do, and or even go through your study materials for the FSOT and say, all right, well, who are these people, and not ever actually put a face to them. So, because you traditionally you only see um, United States president and vice president, and you may or may not even recognize the Department of State unless you know who the Department of State is. Um, Small plug-in. I am currently reading this book, My American Journey. Secretary of State Colin Powell. This is probably the thickest book next to the Bible that I've ever attempted to read, and I'm going for it. And so far, it's a very interesting story. Well, life story, American Journey. All right. Secretary of Commerce Gina Raimondo promotes economic growth, trade, and economic advancement. What does the Department of Labor do? Manages labor issues, including workers' rights, employment, and job training programs. Julie Sue, and she's the acting office holder of the Secretary of Labor, which you can see that here. Okay. We have, oh, okay, so next we have the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Xavier Becerra, uh, oversees the public health, welfare programs, and health regulations. I need to get one of these. I used to have one. I used to love lapel pins, but I don't know what happened to mine. And it made more sense for me to actually be in one of those roles. I used to be in somewhat of that capacity back home, but we can talk about that another time. Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Marcia Fudge or Marcia Fudge manages the national policy of housing, urban development, and homelessness. Secretary of Transportation, what do they do? Oversees national transportation policy, including highways, aviation, and railways. Isn't it interesting that and I love, hold on, let's take a moment. So heading back up to make this really make sense. You have the Constitution, and then the Constitution, and as the government itself started developing, you have the Constitution, and then it started developing into the U.S. Capitol, which is the legislative branch, the executive branch, which is the White House, and the Supreme Court. So you have the judicial branch. So as this started becoming developed, the it was important for the Constitution, written by our founding fathers of the country, for that documentation to be interpreted, for it to be interpreted. You have Supreme Court, who is judging, legislative, which essentially is creating, but it's all through the lens of the Constitution. The Constitution. So, but the interpretation is super important, and here's why. I mean, I don't know why I'm really getting this level of excited about it, but the reason why I think is important because just moments ago in history, we didn't have planes. Even railways are new compared to when the United States was formed. We had horses, and at the same time of these horses, anyway, I don't want to get too far ahead, but we didn't have highways. So this position is kind of new, right? But we had pathways, but there was still a need. It was just based on what we had at the time. But that's the point of interpretation. Sorry, that's really the point. All that I have for that. Secretary of Energy. Now, again, this is also new as it relates to energy evolving. And again, this is why interpretation is important because as we develop as a country and as a society, we're going to continue to have more reasons to have more, well, not more branches, but more positions in the military or in the government. just like we developed a new branch, uh, Department of Air Force, Department of Marines. We're going to have more in other sectors too. So energy is going to evolve. Right now, we're getting heavier into solar, and we're pretty sure we're going to see something soon with was it CERN and the particle accelerator that's happening. So manages energy policy, including nuclear and renewable energy resources. Jennifer Granholm, Department of Education. Miguel Cardona oversees the education policy, including federal student aid and educational standards. Secretary of Veteran Affairs manages benefits and services for U.S. military veterans. Very straightforward. Dennis McDonough. I feel like I've seen him on TV or something. Alejandro Mayorkas, Secretary of Homeland Security, responsible for protecting the United States from domestic and international threats, including terrorism, cybersecurity, and disaster response. So I imagine this person in a scenario, Alejandro and Alejandro, I'm going to roll that R correctly, um, and probably the Secretary of State, they probably collaborated with, well, collaborated together when it came to cybersecurity and maybe also the Department of Defense. So when you see on TV on these movies when the offices are filled, the table is filled, and they're making these hardcore decisions, every decision doesn't require everyone, but some of these positions do require multiple people. Okay, I did not get pictures for these, but these are definitely worthy mentions. So we were speaking earlier about the cabinet, well, or about the White House chief of staff, but I discovered how the map was laid out. That chief of staff is actually rolled up to the Secretary of State. So in addition to the heads of the 15 departments, there's other key officials who hold cabinet rank positions, including the White House chief of staff, U.S. Trade Representative, National Intelligence, the ambassador to the United Nations. Now, this is relevant to us. Their role, Linda's role, her role, Thomas, Linda Thomas Greenfield represents the United States at the United Nations and coordinates U.S. participation in UN activities. Director of Office of Management and Budget, Administrator of Environmental Protection Agency, Administrator of Small Business Administration, Chair of Council Economic Advisors. Next, we have the legislative branch. Now, this doesn't really correlate directly to how we may impact. However, what they do affects um, what we will be able to do in the Department of State. So I'm not going to read over these names. I just felt like it was going to be important to know who, like, essentially what the roles are, because it may be on the F side. Well, it is going to be on the F side. Understanding the different branches: judicial branch, legislative branch, and the executive branch. Within the legislative branch, um, which is Congress, comprised of Congress, the Senate, and the House of Representatives. That's what their branch is. So when you're doing your heavy voting in your area, this is probably what it's for. House Representative this person, Congressperson this person, so that this is what they do. This branch is responsible for making laws. So passing legislation, approving budgets, treaties, declaring war. So again, it affects us, and oversight of the executive branch. It is important to say that each branch does not have more power than the other. Each branch is there to be a check of balance for each department. You have to check the power between each one. So, regardless if you have someone who's power hungry in the executive branch, or if you have somebody who's unfair in the judicial branch, or you have a group of people, which is House of Cards, to show who are just power hungry and they want to completely take over different things and collaborate. You have to have checks and balances. Next, you have the judicial branch, consists of the federal courts, including Supreme Court. This branch interprets the law and ensures that they are applied fairly. So this is the lower court, the Supreme Court, so like state, county. So we're we're almost done. It's we're going to be wrapping up soon, and you can see here that I guess we're almost about halfway here. So, but yeah, just go along for the ride. We're almost there. Oh, speaking of checks and balances, each branch has the power to check the other branches to prevent one branch from becoming too powerful. Just said that. Examples: if the president vetoes congressional legislation, or congressional impeaches, um, or the congressional impeachment powers, judicial reviews the laws. All right, so here we go. This is where we are, the U.S. Department of State. Now, you should already be familiar with this. I'm not going to spend a lot of time. Maybe I'll do a separate video on this and I'll just post it to the YouTube channel for you to view. But here's an overview. The Department of State is a federal agency responsible for conducting foreign relations and implementing U.S. foreign policy. History, point of it, point of conversation here. It was established in 1789. It is the oldest executive department of the United States government. It's important to know that 1789 it was established first. It's the oldest. It's important to know that because the how most countries develop um, land and how they expand their power and gain wealth, they do occupy land, which is the reason why we have territories, um, and so on and so forth. So other countries do the same thing, and or have done the same thing. There's actually current war going on right now with Ukraine and Russia, where they're attempting to take that land and its resources. So, but this is why, from the very beginning, there's always been war. So this is why it's important for us to have it. Moving on. So, so I'm trying to get rid of all these dots here. So the Secretary of State responsible, the Foreign Service Affairs Advisor of the United States, I'm sorry, of the President and head of the Department of State. Responsibilities: overseeing diplomatic relations, negotiate, and this you saw his picture. This- And this is him, Anthony Blinken. Okay, where we at? We're right here. It advises the President of international issues. Deputy Secretary of State is well, so these are two different roles here. So we're looking at the Secretary of State, and then we're also looking at Deputy Secretary of State. Their role: assist the Secretary of State in acts of a secretary when needed. Now, the this is pretty good, as we get to a close. There's so many bureaus inside of these embassies, so many agencies inside of these embassies, and including the consulates are a part of them. So if you're wondering, well, what kind of jobs are there? You can do a lot of different jobs. A lot of different jobs. They have plenty of work to keep you busy and to be able to serve each of these. And this is not all of the agencies. This is just all of the bureaus, all the departments that we were looking at. And we already kind of read over these, but you can take a screenshot of this, and it will so you can go and do research. Ooh, actually, what I'll do is I'll put a link in here so you can actually get this um, document yourself. So hey, I can't. I can't control who gets it, but yeah, you can go and copy and paste it and download it, whatever you want to do. I'll make it a Google link so you can download it as a PDF. You get all the photos and everything else. Uh, so yeah, you've already seen these according to what we've seen on the. Actually, I want to do that right now while it's fresh on my mind. And this is for you. Copy and paste. 'Cause this is exactly what it relates to here. I just went on to put the map here for you. All right, I'm gonna fast forward here. Again, you can screenshot it or you can just click the link and download it for yourself. This is common knowledge. And again, if I need to do a video of what the Foreign Service is, I will. If you're just getting started, next week is my last class, so there's plenty to get caught up on. I'll make a few more videos, and I'll just post them here, and I'll share them in the WhatsApp group and also my YouTube channel. So subscribe if you haven't already. But yeah, these are the different cones here, specialist roles, the ambassador. I did want to make it a little less general, so you'll see here in a moment that instead of just saying what an ambassador is, which is the highest ranking diplomat, the ambassadors are the president's representatives in the foreign country. So they are responsible for overseeing the U.S. embassy, representing the U.S. interests, and negotiating with foreign governments. Um, So the U.S. Foreign Service, we have role of the Foreign Service, you have structure of the Foreign Service, and you have training and professional development, which is a part of that management cone. Foreign Service Institute, continuous learning. If you want, you and some friends can get together. We actually did this in one of our sessions. It was really fun. It wasn't this specific scenario, but we did do a scenario where we had two different countries, or three different countries. So I played the United States, and we had different countries coordinate and actually have conversation of how they would work out certain crises. And after they did the role play, then we had everyone else who was listening on the call go and recap. So this was like a writing challenge, not just an acting challenge. It was a writing challenge and go in and recap what they learned and what actually happened during that session. And it was amazing to see so many variations of what writing objectively was about, but from all these different people. But it was great to see that essentially being able to be more concise, use less fluff words, no $5 words, and they were all right there. It was amazing. But definitely great if you want to try it for yourself. Yeah, that was really good. That was really good. All right, here we go. Let's get to it. Secretary of State. I'm just going to run through it. Uh, the Chief Executive Officer of the Department of State, responsible for implementing the U.S. foreign policy, representing the United States in international affairs, and advising the President of foreign matters. There he is. Great smile. Great guy. Deputy Secretary of State, Wendy Sherman. It's not like I'm doing a graduation, right? Deputy Secretary of State of Management and Resources, Richard Verma. I actually just connected with him on LinkedIn. Amazing. Totally amazing. It's good that you can have that level of access to someone, right? I mean, he hasn't responded to me, but I've connected with him. So um, I would love to learn a little bit more about his journey, which he does share on his page. Victoria Newland, Undersecretary of Political Affairs. That's a cool Broche. Is that how you say it? Pen Broche. Undersecretary for Economic Growth, Energy, and Environment. We saw that on the map, right? Jose Fernandez. I feel like you should have some like some graduation music with this. Bonnie Jenkins, Undersecretary for Arms Control and International Security Affairs. And of course, as I'm not reading it out loud, but you can read here to see what they do, which is really important, right? If you're going to be working in those departments. Undersecretary for Public Diplomacy and Public Affairs, Elizabeth Allen. Just for the sake of time, that's the reason why I'm not going over. Well, I guess it's not going to take long for me to read the role as well. Undersecretary for Civilian Security, Democracy, and Human Rights oversees issues related to human rights, democracy, and civilian security, including counterterrorism and conflict prevention. Uzera, Uzra, Zaya. Undersecretary of State of Management manages the State Department's operations, including budget, human resources, information technology, and logistics. John Bass. I would essentially be reporting to him one day, unless it'd be a new person. Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs, Molly Fee, manages U.S. foreign relations with African countries. I wouldn't mind doing it one day, and before I can become an ambassador, I think it would be great to kind of know. Anyway, just for the sake of time. Assistant Secretary of State of Eastern Asian and Pacific Affairs, overseeing the U.S. relations in countries in East Africa and Pacific. Daniel Christenbrink. All right, we have just a few more minutes, so I'm just going to kind of scroll through. Again, use a screenshot or you just get the link. I'll make sure to put it in the description. And what I will do, also just for the sake of time, is make my way to something I thought was actually really cool. And so I created, not created, but I did this same layout for an actual embassy. So this is the U.S. Embassy of London. Well, I'm not going to be there in October, but I will be in London in October. I want a reason to go in there. I just don't think they let the general public in there. I'm just excited about the opportunity to be around it. Why you ask? Because I want to say diplomacy is kind of noteworthy when it comes to London, right? Diplomacy is noteworthy in London. I'm not saying it was created there, but it's definitely a subject to be studied. Um, Government was created abroad, so I'll leave it at that. Ambassador, the highest ranking diplomat in London for the United States, Jane Hartley, the DCM. Now, there's a show on Netflix called The Diplomat. Check it out. You'll see these different roles in action. Of course, it's dramatized, but who doesn't love a good show? Deputy Chief of Mission, Matthew Palmer. The DCM is the second in command at the embassy, responsible for managing day-to-day operations and serving as acting ambassador to the ambassador's absence. And I'm thinking because of security, there were not, I couldn't find names for these different roles, let alone photos. So that's why I did post that large photo in the beginning. But political affairs, economic affairs, public affairs, political affairs, economic, public, counselor, management affairs, defense, uh, senior commercial officer, agriculture, legal, secretary, public, cultural, human resources, financial, political, military, economic officer, consular officer, general. So I'm basically saying all this to say, as far as to conclude this training, as we're 30 seconds away. If anybody needs to go, I keep my promise for making sure that I don't run over. If anybody needs to go, we're pretty much done. The conclusion of this class, of this session, is one, understanding the U.S. government as it relates to the Department of State and its relation. So understanding the Department of State and its role in the government, and also understanding that you have many options when it comes to different job opportunities inside of foreign service. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. Again, my name is Travis. I'll make sure to put the link and also get this on YouTube. Hope everyone has a good night, and thank you for being here. And thank you for allowing me to study with you. And it's really been a great pleasure. So have a good night, y'all.